Hello, founders. Welcome to Startups.com. We are live. We have a fantastic show for you today. In case you haven't noticed already, our guest here is Will Schroter, founder and CEO of Startups.com. I'll let him introduce himself in just a moment, but it's going to be a barn burner. I promise. He promises. It's going to be fantastic. Before we begin, let's do a few quick housekeeping items. And for those of you who are joining us in the audience there, type in your question in the Q&A box. Use the Q&A box. You can type in questions anytime. We are going to answer them in the order they come. We're going to get to them. And we've got lots of other questions and discussions that we're going to do today. Don't be shy. Use that Q&A box and chat away in the chat. Jen will be monitoring that. Speaking of which, my co-hosts today are Q. She's our producer and one of our editors. And Jen, as always, is joining us. My name is Ed Kang, seven-time founder, 2 exits. I'm the Chief Strategy Officer here at Startups.com. And the other thing I want to talk about, since Will is here, and I'm going to ask the question right away after we introduce him, but this is brought to you by us. If you have not checked it out already, we got an amazing podcast called Startup Therapy. And what it is our CEO, Will Schroter, as well as our Chief Marketing Officer, Ryan Tan, and they sit around and they talk about the no BS stuff that nobody else wants to talk about when it comes to startups. And they just go back and forth. And you're going to learn from Will and Ryan's experience that not everything is as it appears or is advertised in startup world. And it's great. Startup Therapy is the reason that I came and joined Startups.com because it was so much help for me back in my day. Will, thanks for joining us. Give us a little background. Let's not take for granted, since you're already famous around these parts, well, let's not take for granted that people know who you are. Give us a little background, who you are, where you come from, and let's talk about Startups.com in a moment.
Yeah. So the high-level version is, been a founder for 31 years. I started one of the first internet companies in 1994, a company called Blue Diesel. It was one of the first web design companies. We were building, it's so weird to say this, I feel like such a dinosaur when I say this, but we were building the first websites on the internet, which is crazy to think, on the web in today's terms. But like when we got a client that said, hey, I want to sell stuff online, we had to scratch our heads to say, like, could you sell stuff online? Like, is that a thing? This is like pre-Amazon, right? And so I got in this as early as you could possibly get in this. We grew that to about a $700 million business. We sold it in 2001. From there, I ended up starting another agency, essentially, but to start my own businesses, kind of like what we'd call an incubator now. But I had 1 million businesses for 1 million companies, and I wanted to start them all, which is a terrible idea, by the way. And I ended up starting 8 more companies, the last of which is Startups.com. In that time, I raised for 3 different companies, so raised venture for 3 different companies. At one time, was running 5 companies at the same time. Also would not recommend doing that. And what was cool about it, though, was I got to see lots of different versions of how your startup founder life could go. So imagine you graduated college. And the day you graduated, you said, I'm going to take 5 different professions, like a Barbie doll, right? Like a different version of everything, right? And you lived 5 different professions, totally different at exactly the same time. And every day you got to compare and contrast how one career went with another. That was me running 5 companies at the same time. And in that, I just got so much experience. In the same time, I'd have one VC calling saying, we have no interest in your business. We hope it goes under. And another VC calling saying, I cannot wait to invest in your business. Sometimes it's the same VC. Right? Like, it was amazing to watch the dichotomy of it. And so with that, I ended up getting a ton of startup experience. At some point, lots of founders started to come to me and say, hey, I heard you were a startup guy. Can you explain to me how fundraising works? Can you explain to me customer acquisition? Or, I'm dealing with this co-founder issue. And so I just started helping all these founders just because it seemed like the right thing to do. And after a while, after answering the same question like 6,000 times, I was like, maybe we could go crazy and put this on a website. And that was the genesis of Startups.com, to create a place where every time a startup would start something, a founder would start something, we would have a way to just say, look, these are the answers to the test. You don't need to figure out a pitch deck for the first time. It's been done 1 million times before. This is exactly how to do it. You want to raise money? Been done 1 million times before. This is exactly how to do it. And over time, we just started to build up a community of other people like yourself, Ed, that were like, hey, I could probably answer those questions too. So Startups.com was really kind of like the final act in my career, so to speak, that took all the startup knowledge that I had gained and funneled it into one thing. And now I have my dream job. I just get to sit around and bullshit with founders all day. It's amazing.
It's amazing. I'm glad you roped me into it. You twisted my rubber arm. Totally appreciate it. It's been great. Tell us a little bit about Startup Therapy and how you got to that and what it's all about, because I'm curious. I actually don't even know the story of how you got this podcast going.
Yeah, well, what's funny about it is Ryan and I had the same conversations with the same founders over and over about startup stuff, but really about founder stuff. And this was really interesting to us. It turns out when you advise enough founders, and Ed, you know this because you do it nonstop all day, it turns to the personal side of the founder journey way more than it turns to the startup side of how do I grow customers or raise money. yes, we have those concerns as founders, but really it's all the personal stuff that we're dealing with, right? With just the emotion of this, the journey of this, et cetera. But no one ever talks about it openly. But when we talk privately to founders, we're coaching them through this stuff nonstop. I just got off 10 calls in a row because today I do office hours at startups, and I do back-to-back calls of 15 minutes a piece. Every single startup that I talk to, every founder that I talk to, while they had some business issues, most of what they needed was a little startup therapy. Right? They just need to be reminded that they're okay, that the business is okay. This is just a moment in time, et cetera. So same thing. Ryan and I were like, why don't we just have these conversations about these topics in real time, totally unscripted, right? We'll just pick a topic, something startups are dealing with, and we'll just talk about it for like half hour, an hour, and see where it goes. Well, we put episodes out there. This is years ago. We're 300 episodes deep now, so we've been doing this for a minute. We put an episode out there, and we didn't know what to expect. We didn't think anybody would watch it. And we get this email that I'll never forget. We get this email from some person that just picked up the podcast, started listening to it, and he said, guys, I need to tell you a story because this podcast just changed my life, right? Wow. Which was not what I was expecting, right? This is like our third episode. We're like not far into this, right? He said, I'm driving across the country with my fiance, and I just start listening to your episodes. And he was like, it was like you were in my head. You were saying exactly what I was trying to say this entire time about my feelings, my frustrations, etc. And my fiance looks over at me and I'm crying. And she's like, what's going on? And he's like, this is everything I've been trying to tell you for the longest time, right? He's like, I finally had like a voice. And I did not see that one coming. It was one of the coolest emails I've ever gotten, by the way. It was just so well articulated, and it was so personal. And then the light bulb went off. We were like, hey, he might not be the only one. And so instead of building a podcast about how to build startups, we said, let's focus the podcast on how to be a founder and how to deal with all the stuff that founders deal with. And I think that's what led to the success of the podcast, was that the founders were like, this is the actual stuff. It's in our head right now that's keeping us up at 3 a.m. And you're walking us through it without judging us. You're saying, yeah, this stuff's hard, but this is how you get through it.
You know what I like about it is that it's not your typical, let's get a successful founder to brag on his exit and, talk to you like he's at the final stage, has won the Super Bowl and type thing. Like, you really get into the nitty gritty. I'm curious then, because it was different for me. Like, I was ingesting all these different podcasts of, rich and famous people, and you aspire, and it's great. It's inspirational, and not taking away anything from your success and Ryan's success. But why do you think it is that founders, especially, like, we're talking about entrepreneurs and executives, talking about mental health and challenges all the time. Well, what do you think it is about the founders and the startup industry where people just don't have the conversations that you have on Startup Therapy?
Well, I think it's a couple things. I think, we've got a massive market for entrepreneur porn, right? Like, it's like, we've got to talk about, like the biggest exit and the biggest outcome, and they're cool stories because they have cool endings, right? I think the difference for us is we talk about all the times it's not a cool ending. Right? Not exclusively. We talk about the good things too, but we also talk about the bad things. But I think one of the things that changes the most, that I think people really dialed into, was the fact that we talk about stuff that's relevant to where you are in life right now. I'll give you an example. Within the first year we were doing our episodes, one of the first episodes we did was something, I can't remember the exact title, but it was something to the effect of, what you need to make is $250,000, not $250 million. Now, $250,000, if you actually had it in the bank, would fundamentally change your life forever. Because it can pay for 99% of anything that you'll ever run into in life, right? Short of, buying a house or something. But all the problems in life essentially financially go away at that point, because whatever road bump or speed bump you hit, you can pay for, which for the first time in your life allows you to go focus on making those bigger dollars. So focus on doing that first. And so around the time that episode went out, I was sitting down with a guy named Sam Parr. Sam does a great podcast now, My First Million, but this is when he was first starting the hustle. And Sam was, very early in. He was trying to still make his first buck. We were at dinner and he's like, dude, I listened to that episode and that resonated with me so perfectly, right? And I remember like looking on his face, he felt it, right? He's like, this is where I belong right now. These are my concerns right now. It's cool that somebody might go on to make $1 billion. I'm trying to make rent.
Mm-hmm.
So I think part of this was being very cognizant that the journey that our founders are on right now ain't billions of dollars. They don't have billionaire problems, right? They have $100 problems and they need to solve them right now. And so we make that okay. And we talk about why it's common and what to do about it.
I'll be super transparent just so that everybody can get to know us. The reason I came here, same experience, listen to Startup Therapy. I just gone through a nasty co-founder divorce. Like, we're talking fight with the board. They ousted me. I'm the CEO and an investor, one of the initial investors. They asked me to be CEO. They locked me up. They sent me all these garbage emails and accusations and legal documents and all stuff. Then they locked up all my intellectual property and put it on the shelf. And just it was one of the worst. And I was so raw. And to have you and Ryan actually talk the way that you're talking about, I was just like, oh my gosh, like I have the permission to be me and to have these emotions. And then you did the thing. You said, hey, join us at Startups.com. We sit around and talk about this all day long. And I was like, sign me up. And then I was there, and the rest is history. But so tell us about Startups.com in terms of, because there are going to be lots of people watching this on YouTube and all over the place that don't really know what Startups.com is for very good reasons. We've been kind of flying stealth forever. But what is Startups.com? Give us the pitch.
Okay, so the simple version is this. If I were to give you a pitch deck style, I would say it looks like this. 40 million people globally start a business each year. 0 of them know what they're doing, right? That is the problem we're trying to solve. And the reason for that is because everyone's a freshman at this school, right? Everyone's doing this for the first time. And it is such a lonely journey. And it is loaded with misinformation. It is loaded with misinformation. So everywhere you turn, you turn to your uncle who made a bunch of money in real estate like in the 80s, and he's dispensing, his information. And you're like, okay, I think that's good information. You talk to a local investor and they're telling you what to do and they're dispensing their information. All along, you have no idea. They're feeding you the worst information possible while trying to do it in the kindest way possible. There's so much misinformation. And so what we do is we say, look, it's not hard to see the patterns of what to do right here. Here are the patterns. Here's how to do customer acquisition. Here's how to build a pitch deck, et cetera. And it's not to say it's going to work every time. It's not that easy, but the recipes work, right? It's kind of like if I said, hey, if you want to open a high-end steakhouse, here are all the recipes. Now, you may suck at running a high-end steakhouse, but those are the recipes that high-end steakhouses run to become high-end steakhouses. And that's what we do. We give people a recipe and a prescription and a plan for every single thing that they want to do in starting a company. Now, the recipe is like the smallest part of it. Right? Sure. The recipe is cool. That's something you can follow. I think, and I just got up a bunch of calls with a bunch of founders, and what they always tell me is that was great and it was useful and it was great. But what actually pulled me in or kind of keeps me around or kind of keeps me engaged and what makes me so happy are all the people there, right? Our 100%. Community is awesome.
Yeah.
And I think, I don't know if this is like a product feature. It's just an algorithm of who we are. We're just kind, right? I don't have any other way to describe it. We're not here to tell you your idea is terrible. We'll give you tough love if you need it, but even then we'll make sure you're okay, right? It brings me no pleasure to make you feel bad about your idea. This isn't like Shark Tank, right? But we empathize. I think that's a big part. When I say we, I don't just mean Startups.com. I mean the whole community.
Sure.
Right? The whole community has been through what you're going through, and they get it. And their whole idea is like, look, we get it. You're like, I'm down to my last dollar. I don't know how I'm going to convert a customer, et cetera. Yeah, it's stressful. It's crazy stressful. Our job is to help walk you through that and embrace you in the product, in the process. So again, yes, I think we're good at teaching people how to build startups, but I think the people that are doing the teaching and giving the support are the reason people use us.
100%. I tell founders all the time, my greatest claim to fame here is going to be I've twisted the rubber arms of people who are way smarter than me to help other founders, right?
Yep.
And like we've got some just first class A-tier founders that have been there, done that, who've gone to heights that I basically would dream of in many ways. They've been there. They've been on top of that mountain. We happen to be in the trenches all day long, which has value, but we've got some amazing founders that people can listen to.
I think there's a secret among founders that new founders don't find out until way too late. And that is founders love to help founders. Founders love to help founders. And, I see it in other parts of society. I see it with veterans. Veterans love to help veterans because they've been through the same shit, right? Moms love to help moms because their kids are driving them nuts, right? They make those instant connections, and founders are the same way. However, new founders often don't see it, right? In other words, they haven't been kind of in this ecosystem, this world yet. So it doesn't occur to them that this super high-powered founder that's done all these incredible things will sit down and have lunch with you and just help you. And you're like, why would they help me? Because they can, right?
And that's the best part.
It's an amazing thing.
Yeah, we've got, like, you want to talk about loneliness and confusion. Like when you're in a small market, you're in a small little town and you've got dreams because you're checking out on the internet. And like we've got international founders, like they just don't have access. Like if you're living in the Bay, that's one thing. If you're living in New York, Boston, but we have so many founders spread across all over the place. And that's where the magic starts to happen because we don't have to fly there. They actually get to participate in a mecca, like a metropolis of founders working together in one concentrated spot. And that's what you've done. You brought them together.
And I was surprised because this whole thing, everything that we teach is really just me having gone through the journey personally and being like, my God, let me not make people go through the same mistakes that I went through, right? Because some of them are just dumb. But the first time it happened to me, the first time I saw like that a founder was actually willing to help me, totally unexpected. I was in a meeting meeting. There's a guy named Jim Grody, who is the founder of a pizza chain called Donato's, very big in the United States, right?
Oh, yeah.
Huge chain, right? It's based in Columbus, Ohio, where I went to school. And he was giving a talk or something, right? And I remember I walked up to him and I just introduced myself and I said, hey, I'd love to learn more about your journey or whatever. He's like, sure. What do you want to know? Like, wait, you're willing to help me? He's like, yeah, of course I'm willing to help you. It didn't even occur to me in a million years. And while that was totally bizarre to me at the time, I'm completely unsurprised by that answer now, because I just see it all the time. So by bringing in a whole bunch of founders, we brought all these people that are willing to help each other for no outcome, by the way. Like, no one's asking and pay me. They're just like, hey, you need help? I'll help. And it doesn't even occur to me that there should be some exchange, which I think is awesome.
It's great. It's like a fraternity, sorority, whatever you want to call it. It's our tribe. We want everybody to succeed. The rising tide raises all ships. It's great. Let's jump into some questions. And we've been collecting questions and researching what people might want to know from you, from us. Hugh, what's the first question we can dive into?
Thanks, Ed. Our first question is, when you were first starting Blue Diesel at just 19, how did you convince early stakeholders to believe in your vision without a track record?
It was so bad. All right, so let me tell you a story of how bad this was. Okay, so when people hear these stories like, oh, you grew a company at $700 million, you must have been like a genius prodigy or something like that, or none of that. Okay. So at the time, I was 19 years old. I wanted to start this business, not because I was a business person. I was a theater major. I thought I was going to be an actor for a living, right? And I sucked at it. So thank God that didn't work out. Very homeless actor. But it just so happened when I was 10 years old, I got access to a computer. I learned how to get online. And when the internet came around in the form that it is now, I was one of very few people that just happened to have known the technology. So I decided that maybe someone else would want this new thing that everybody was talking about called a web page, and I just happened to know how to do it. So to get my first client, okay, and this is to give you an idea of how green I was, to get my first client, my roommate in college, he was dating a girl whose father was doing consulting for the chief marketing officer for a company called AAA, big in the States. And they were looking to do internet. Like back then they said, we need to do internet. They didn't even know how to use the term back then. And nobody knew what it was, to be clear. So he's like, hey, they want to meet with you. And I was like, oh, that'd be wonderful, right? And they said, yeah, but they want to meet at your office. And I was like, oh, of course, you should absolutely meet at our office, because of course we have an office, right? And I was like, stop by anytime. They're like, cool, we'll be there Friday. It's Monday, right? I'm like, okay. So it's Friday, or it's Monday. I have no staff. I have no company. I have no office. I have no office furniture, nothing, right? Here's how we pulled it off. I walked down the street because I also didn't have a car. I walked down the street and I'm looking for vacant spots on campus that could serve as an office, but there are no offices on campus because it's a freaking campus, right? The only place I find is an old hippie clothing store that had been abandoned that was upstairs from a music hall, right? A concert hall. Right? Complete shithole, right? This place was disgusting, right? The bathrooms didn't even work, right? And I go to the landlord and I'm like, what do you need for this, for rent, whatever? He's like, $900. I was like, absolutely. He's like, it has to be here, on the 30th of the month. I was like, absolutely. I had $16 in my bank account at that point, right? Like when I signed that lease. Okay. So needless to say, taking some chances, right? So now we have a giant space, this big old dilapidated hippie clothing store that has nothing inside it. It's just a big vacuous empty space. And it's Tuesday. Friday, we have to be fully up and running. Okay. I go to this at Ohio State's campus. I go to Ohio State University's campus and they have a surplus division where all the stuff in the university goes to die. Right? Like I think of like back then fax machines and copiers and computers and stuff like that. And I go in there and there's just piles and piles of all this junk. And I go to the intern working there and I'm like, I need that pile of fax machines. I need the pile of monitors. I need that pile of keyboards, blah, blah, blah. He's like, none of that works. I was like, doesn't matter. Right? I need it all. Right? So we load all this stuff up in my buddy's pickup truck. We take it back to the office and we put everything everywhere, right? Like old like desks and everything else like that. As Friday approaches, I tell all of my friends to bring the one clip-on tie that they own and walk around like movie extras and pretend they're super busy. Now, the funny thing about that is if you ever watch an actual like movie or TV show in an office, you ever notice there's always people moving around? But if you're ever in an office, everyone's just like sitting at their desk, right? Like there's always like people on phones and having all these like walking conversations, and none of that's real. But it looks cool. And so basically that was my theater background. I was like, okay, I need you to go from point A to point B, et cetera, and exit stage right. And so when the client showed up, the place is teeming with people, right? Like everyone is like at their desk on their phones that don't work, like in front of their computers that have like gibberish on them, but nobody knew what that was back then, so it didn't matter. And I would take I'd take the client through like this office space, right? And be like, this is Ron. Ron handles whatever. I just make something up, right? And we finally make their way back to the one computer, my laptop, which was the only thing that worked in the entire place. And I'd show them a demo of a web page, and they were blown away. And as I'm doing that, I had like prompts where my friends would come up and be like, Will, what do you think about this? And it's like their book report or something. I'm like, run with it. And it was a whole thing. But it looked awesome. It looked awesome, right? Now, here's the thing. Charade notwithstanding, we actually could do the work, right? I just want to be clear. It wasn't like I was doing Elizabeth Holmes with them, right? Like our work was phenomenal, right? And they were going to pay us peanuts to do the most amazing work we've ever done. So they were actually getting one over on us. But what I knew was, so long as I could make it look like we were presentable for the work and so they give us a chance to do the work. I've got to point out, I was 19 years old at the time. Okay. I still had pimples on my face and I looked like I was maybe in 8th grade. Okay. This was long before Mark Zuckerbergs of the world and young people had any shot whatsoever at getting any kind of business whatsoever. To prove that point, I'll fast forward 2 weeks later. 2 weeks later, AAA wants me to go to their office, which I'm also unprepared for. I've never done a presentation in my life. I don't even know what a presentation is. And you couldn't Google it because the internet didn't exist yet, right? And I'm thinking to myself, like, what do people do in meetings? And all I had, my only reference for what meetings were like maybe what I saw on TV. And at the time, my favorite movie was a movie called Wall Street. So I just assumed like you had to show up like Gordon Gekko. So what do? I'm broke, mind you. I go to Goodwill and I look for any suit that will even remotely fit me. I find the most ill-fitting tweed 3-piece suit. I look like a banker from like a 1950s commercial, right? I might as well have like a pocket watch and a monocle, right? It's so ridiculous. And put it on a kid who looks like he's 12 years old, right? It couldn't have been more ridiculous. So with that, I borrow my roommate's car because I don't have one. And I drive out to the meeting. I go in the meeting and I set things up and I'm presenting. And I'm thundering away for 45 minutes straight. And for those of you that have given business presentations, you never want to thunder away for 45 minutes straight. What that means is no one's listening. And so after my presentation where I'm explaining the origins of the internet and blah, 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 all the people in the room, and there's like 12 people in the room, and it looked like the Jedi Council. There was nobody there under 100 years old, right? Kind as can be, but not the youngest folks. They just look at me like jaws wide open. And the CMO looks around the room as if he's like standing to get everybody's buy-in. And he looks at me and he goes, son, by the way, in a business presentation, you never want to be addressed as son. There's nothing cool about that. Nothing comes after son that also says you're the smartest person I met. He said, son, do you know we have letterhead older than you? And I was like, that's literally your only question. It's their only question. They had no idea what I just said. All they knew is they needed internet. And this kid in this $8 suit was internet. So when we talk about like, what does it take to sell? Part of it means just showing up, right? Part of it's like most people won't do the things that you need to do in order to get those opportunities. So part of it is just stepping up. For me, I had nothing to lose. I'm like, I'm out $8 on this suit, but other than that, I'm good. And I owe $900 at the end of the month, so I'm hoping you'll pay me soon. But that was it.
And what happened? Did you win the job or?
We did. First client. That was our first client. And I've never been ridden so hard by a client in my life for the amount of money that they paid us. I'm not even kidding. I'll give you like real dollars. I think I worked like 7 years for them for $1,500.
Wow.
Yeah, like it was, I'm only half kidding, but I remember later on that the guy who had made the introduction to us, who was my roommate's girlfriend's father, he said to me, he's like, yeah, I knew all along we were totally underpaying you. I was just waiting for you to do something about it. It's like, thanks.
So translate that to our founders today. Like they're listening to this story and they're thinking, okay, that's time's passed. Will has definitely qualified himself as a dinosaur. We all are here.
The given, yeah.
What would you say is the equivalent of that today for a founder today in our community?
Well, some of it there isn't an equivalent, right? Thank God, right? In other words, like you don't have to go up into a group of strangers and do an awkward business presentation in an $8 suit anymore, right? Like you can post a profile on Upwork and people will send you business, right? It's way easier. Now that said, it's also harder because there's a million people that can do it. It's harder to differentiate, right? Like when I walked into that room to give that presentation, there was no one coming in after me. It was just me. I cold called every company I had ever heard of, like Intel, MasterCard, Chase Bank, etc. And I basically would just call the main line. I mean, as dumb as this sounds, and said, can I speak to the internet person? And sure enough, there was one person that had been called the internet person. And I would get routed to them and I got them as clients, right? Like I was just willing to do stuff that most people wouldn't be willing to do. And I think that is how you differentiate yourself. If I just go on Upwork, and that's why I use the example, and I post one of a million profiles, how did I do anything different, right? I think now you got to be creative. I see people doing it on social and how they stand out, right? I see it in some of the work that they do. I see it in the content they produce. That you've got to make yourself extra special. I didn't have to be special at all because there's no one else. Now there's so many.
But I remember you telling me lots of stories. You have a background in sales. And I think this goes to founder-led sales. So many founders, they just want to build it and they think it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. Like they're just like in their mind, it's the most amazing thing ever. And they refuse to pick up that phone. And I harken back, I tell founders this all the time. Like the wealthiest people, I saw a stat, like 80% of them were in direct sales right from the beginning. Like even if you look at Warren Buffett, he sold candy and Mark Cuban went door to door, right? And a lot of people see Mark Cuban as he is now, this Dallas Mavericks, he's since sold and he's this guy on Shark Tank, but he started in the internet. Like he had broadcast.com and he was doing all these things and he cut his teeth on direct sales. And that's what you've demonstrated is go out, pick up the phone and call people.
Yeah. I mean, and my thing is you just have to get good at being told no, right? Getting told yes is the easy part. Getting told no is the hard part, right? And I guess the only reason it worked for me was because I didn't expect anybody to say yes. Like when somebody said, yes, we'll give you business, I'd be like, really? I was like I expected the answer to be no. And so when I heard anything other, I was like, wow, bonus.
Yeah, that's always great to hear. And that's so empowering. You know, when a founder goes out there and they start selling and they get that first order, man, that feels good.
Oh, it's the best feeling in the world. You feel
it's
like
awesome.
You just conquered the world.
Q, what's the next question?
Our next question, Ed, is in your experience with startups like Fundable, what traits in a seed stage founder most attract venture capitalists?
Oh, wow. That's a great one. Okay. So it's not what people think it is. Like what people think is, oh, the idea is so strong and the market is so big. Yes. I mean, obviously those help. But if you talk to investors behind the scenes, what they'll tell you over and over and over is we bet on the founder. Now, when you say that, that freaks people out. It's like, well, yeah, but I don't have any experience. Like they're betting on me. They must mean like I'm looking for someone with tons of experience. No, you know what they're looking for? Humility. It's crazy as that sounds. What you'll hear over and over and over is I just want someone that's coachable. And when they say that, it's because they have to work with this person nonstop. And if you have an arrogant, pig-headed founder, have you ever done this long enough? Dealing with those idiots is the worst thing that you can do. So given that I was one of those idiots and I saw what that friction was like, I get it now, right? Like I get it. And I remember the investors at the time, like, I have 3 different companies that were venture funded. Investors would come to me and they're like, Will, there's some things that we like about you, right? Like you're aggressive, you've got like, you get stuff done, et cetera, but like, you kind of don't listen. And I was like, look, let me be clear. I don't listen. Right. Like I'm just not good at it. Right. And I'm not, that's, I don't care about other people. I'm really empathetic, but I feel really strongly about like pushing forward. I don't form huge committees. I don't like, worry about consensus. I'm like, let's just get it done. And that's not the same as saying, well, let me wait to the board meeting and have them tell me how to run my company. I just don't feel that way. And by virtue of that, you should not invest in me. Right? That's a terrible idea. Go find somebody that maybe has an idea like mine that will actually listen to what you have to say. And let me tell you, it's also the reason I don't invest. Because I could never stand investing in me. If I had to deal with me all day, and I'm like, dude, I just gave you all this money, and you're not listening to the most basic stuff. My head would explode, right? So it works both ways. Like, at least I've got some self-awareness around it. But from a first-time founder, you're trying to show that you have that skill. One of the things founders don't do over and over and over is ask questions. Mm-hmm. See, here's what happens. And this is a factor of youth as well. When we're young, we're insecure. And when we're insecure, we don't feel good about asking questions because we feel it makes us vulnerable. It makes us look silly, right? Turns out we find out later that the smart people, the experienced people, the people that get ahead ask lots of questions. And that's their superpower. It also puts you in command of the room. Right. And so one of the things I learned when I was early in my career, because I didn't know anything, I was so unprepared for life, is when clients would ask me a question that I clearly didn't know the answer to, I would always respond with a question. They'd be like, Will, what will our market positioning be if we go into this market? And I had no idea if they were talking about it. And so I'd always come back with a question, which, by the way, this is like the ninja move every time. I would say something like, what have you tried in the past and what's worked? Let's start there. Mm-hmm. What I'm really saying is explain to me what the hell you're talking about. And hopefully by the time you're done answering my question, I'll have any idea what you just said. But I was just saying it because I was anxious and insecure and I didn't know what I was talking about. But it turned out the client was like, we love Will because he asks questions. He digs in, right? And it turns out when you're talking to investors, if you don't ask them questions, you're letting them control the narrative, right? So if they say, hey, I don't think that the market size is big enough. First question. What would the market size have to be big enough? Like, tell me exactly what that number is. So make sure I'm not guessing at what that answer is. So one of the things I did well inadvertently is I asked lots of questions, still do. And it turned out that for investors, they love knowing that I had that curiosity, right? They love knowing that I was asking those questions. And frankly, they like to be asked questions. And one of the things I would have never thought, but a huge, huge differentiation.
Let's break that down. just for the founders who are going to be watching this, who are listening to this live, and who will be watching a recording, you're going to look at sort of a spectrum. And so on one side, if you're early and you're new, we want founders who ask the questions like Will said, because startups are fundamentally hard. And all the time, investors in early stage, and a lot of founders don't realize this, we just expect the founder to be wrong. Like 80% of the assumptions to be wrong, but we expect them to figure it out. And that's the reason you invest in founders. That's the first thing. And you do not have to be a professional capital raiser. I think something like that happened. Well, I heard stories from other general partners and other investors that they say, Ed, in 2021, it was like people were better at raising capital than they were in building product and solving problems. And we're seeing the fall of that right now, right? That's the nuclear winter. And so as long as you, the founder, you have domain expertise, you are obsessed with the problem, you show resilience, you're smart enough, you're an exceptional person that, guess what? I can help you with legal. I can help you with all the other stuff that you don't need to worry about right now. I want to know you're solving the problem and you care about it and you're in it for the next 10 years. If you can do that, I don't care if you've done 10 ventures, because you probably have new ideas that you're going to bring to the table. That's how I see it.
I agree. Again, a big part of that is the relationship. And I think that more than anything, like people, love ideas, et cetera, but they fall in love with the founders. Right. And so that personal connection that you make with them and kind of how they feel about you makes a big difference. Right. And very few founders, much to what people don't understand, are all that charismatic. Right. So it's not like you're like big kind of glossy salesperson and that's what gets you in there. More of what they're looking for is authenticity.
True.
Right. You are a big, giant nerd. And that's perfectly okay because you're authentic, right? You're authentic about it. All you care about is payments processing, right? You're so nerdy about payments processing. Awesome. I love the authenticity. I love the honesty. I love the vulnerability that comes with it. It's not what people think, which it's like, oh, again, this is this glossy salesperson that's coming in and kind of wooing everybody. That's not the way it works. In fact, when you see that person, it's often a red flag because you're immediately thinking, oh, I'm about to be sold. And remember, investors do nothing but sit through pitch meetings all day. They see this a mile away.
Pro tip, we'll let it out. Raise your own money. Investors want to talk to the CEO. Finding someone to do your investor relations and take all your meetings, that's not going to work. So, okay, Q, next question.
Thanks, Ed. Our next question is, what early validation methods did you use for Startups.com that signaled it could scale into the world's largest startup launch platform?
Well, actually, it's funny. So I'll go backward to kind of like how we got here and kind of where that came from. So how we got here is like I mentioned earlier, which was I'd been doing startups for a long time. I just kept getting asked the same questions over and over and over. And at some point, I didn't want to start lots more companies. I got to a point where I was like, you know what? I've done the thing where I start a company and we try to get to an exit. Sometimes we do, sometimes we don't. And then all we do is just rinse and repeat and try to start over again. It felt vapid. Honestly, like it wasn't about like, hey, can we make money? It was almost like, are we creating any value or are we just building things to like somehow sell them to somebody else? And so I said, what I want to do for the rest of my life, and I've told you this before, like when I started this, I deliberately started this company with this goal because I never wanted to start another company again. I wanted this to be the last thing I ever do. And with that, I thought to myself, all I want to do for the rest of my life is sit around and bullshit with founders all day long and somehow hopefully get paid for it. Now, the first response everybody gets, oh, you have to become an investor. That's how you sit around and bullshit with entrepreneurs. I was like, absolutely not. I would suck at it. I'm not even going to pretend I'd be good at it, right? I was like, but I am good at like advising founders, but I didn't really know what that looked like. And so I said, let me figure like categorically where I can advise them. So the first place we tried was with fundable.com, which was one of the first crowdfunding sites, like way back in the Kickstarter era, like, 2011, 2012, like when the Jobs Act got passed for the equity side, et cetera. And the idea was, let's build a marketplace where people can come on and find investors, which sounds silly now because it's been done a million times. Back then, it was actually pretty new. We launch it and thousands of companies are coming to us saying, we want to raise money. Turns out when you say we have a bucket of money of investors, a lot of people tend to find out who you are, right? And they all come to you. But here's where it got interesting. They all come to us and they say, hey, I need to raise money, blah, blah, blah. Like, cool. Do you have a pitch deck? Do you have any collateral, et cetera? I'm like, not really. Or I do. Here it is. And it's terrible, right? And we started to scratch our heads. We're like, well, what are you doing for customer acquisition? Like, well, we haven't figured that out. Or, what did you do to validate the idea? We haven't really figured that out. It started to occur to us that like founders, when they came to us, they had a capital raising problem, but that was just a prelude to like 900 other problems they either had right now or just about to have. And so then light bulb went off. I was like, what if we just help them with all of them? Which, by the way, is generally a really bad idea. Like as you expand and go broad, that usually means you're kind of going in too many directions at once. So what we did, and this is totally bizarre, but we're weird, so it's what we did. And we said, we're going to buy companies in all of the different spaces that we want to be in customer acquisition and advising, et cetera, et cetera. And we went out, I moved my family to San Francisco and I took like 10 meetings a day. I was in nonstop meetings for like a year plus. Wow. And I met with every single startup mostly venture funded, every single startup that was even remotely in our space that somehow sold to startups. With that, we did diligence on 100 companies and we bought 6 of them, all in rapid fire. All of those companies were covering different parts of the startup ecosystem, like LaunchRock and Clarity and the different products we have. That's what kind of helped get us into the market at scale. But what validated it was just simply listening to customers. And the customers were saying, hey, I need to use your platform, but I kind of not really ready yet. How do I get ready? And that's where like the light bulb went off to say, wait a minute, why isn't anybody getting them ready? Like who's not fixing this problem? And so that's really what led us in there. It was just listening very closely.
We had Vadim, our lead advisor here at Startups.com, on yesterday, and Q asked a similar question, like, what's the first thing a founder should do? And his answer was just talk to another human. That's it. Like, go talk to people. And that's goes all the way back to you picking up the phone, talk to people. I think, well, I'm sure you have thoughts on this. Something just happens because we're so connected, social media, that you can actually get by not talking to someone. You read a few posts, you talk on social media, you get your echo chamber of people liking your comment or your little post, say, oh yeah, absolutely. And then you think you've got it all figured out, but people don't talk to each other. I think that's one of the main mistakes that I'm seeing.
I think it's multi-layered. One is, you mentioned the bias, right? That people talk to people within their echo chamber. So yes, if I talk to a whole bunch of people that think exactly like I do, I'm going to get answers that are exactly like mine.
100%.
Right? One of the funniest exercises we go through, I love seeing the expression on the founder's face, is we have them take their pitch deck and we have them present it to other founders, just a bunch of random people they've never met before, but all founders. So contextually, they understand what's in the deck. And they'll present a slide. They'll present like the market size slide. And in the founder's mind, nailed it. They'll present it to 5 smart strangers, and all of them, almost every time without fail, will be like, I have no idea what this means, right? And again, these are smart people that would otherwise know. It's not like I'm showing grandma and grandma doesn't understand what a startup is, right? These are people that absolutely understand it. But it turns out that founder presenting it never presented it to strangers, truly presented it to strangers, people who were just fresh eyes to see it. Now that goes with all kinds of things, not just a pitch deck. It's your ideas, it's your marketing messages, etc. Having lots of fresh eyes to be able to see what you're doing, especially at the formative stages, is so important. And that's why I think a lot of people that are here, they get access to all these founders, and there are a whole bunch of people that actually do want to help them, but we'll also shoot them straight. They'll say, I have no idea what this slide means, but they're smart enough to articulate that and help you get to that point.
Let me give you a story, and you're dealing with this all the time, but this is just a great story to illustrate what Will's talking about. Founder sends me their pitch deck here, Startups.com. I read it, and it's like this generic problem. No one likes vacations, right? And then your solution is, we give people great vacations. I'm like, okay, what exactly are we doing this? So then I have to send this email. Said, just explain to me, like, you showed up and I'm in junior high and you're at career day. And you're saying, hey, little buddy, this is what I do for my job. And then he types it out and I'm like, this is so cool. Nothing of that was in the pitch deck. And that's what we're talking about. Unless you've got those extra pair of eyes and people check your blind spots, like, you're just not going to see the forest for the trees.
You bet. When I get people's pitch decks and I help them out with them, the first thing I say, same as you, let's say everything you just said, but let's say it in half the words. Right. And, fun hack for, folks that are listening on the recording or anything later. If you take whatever you wrote and just put it into ChatGPT and say this in half the words, it'll give you a better version almost every single time.
Every time.
It's a hilarious hack. But the simplest terms are the best terms. If funny, we mentioned ChatGPT because one of the things that I was doing with my kids in the car the other day, I was explaining to them how the vocal ChatGPT works, where you could just talk to it. And I said, hey, ChatGPT, explain whatever complex concept I was talking about in terms that an 8-year-old could understand. It immediately converted a very complex problem into something super simple and use an analogy that anybody could understand. And then I did something. I said, explain it again, but use a completely different example and a completely different way of saying it. But again, as an 8-year-old could understand it. Then they explained it again with a completely different example, right? The reason I say this is because we now have that technology where we can say, take this gooey thing that's in my head and say it back to me in someone else's words so I can hear it for the first time. Incredibly powerful.
ChatGPT even analyzed the pictures and gave me analysis on that. It's crazy. It's insane. Okay, let's have some fun. Enough serious talk. Q has lined up something for us to have a hot take on, something happening in the industry. Q, what are we talking about today?
The coolest startup in the Bay Area is a baseball team called the Oakland Ballers. Today, we're diving into how startup principles are being used in unexpected ways, like running a sports team. With Will's expertise in launching and scaling companies, we chose the story of the Oakland Ballers, a team that's using innovative startup strategies to build a community-driven, fan-owned franchise. So Paul Friedman, a serial entrepreneur, co-founded the Oakland Ballers in response to the Oakland A's move to Las Vegas. Together with Brian Carmel, they applied startup principles like A&B testing and iteration to build the team, raising $2 million and embracing fan ownership by involving 2,200 fans who invested $1,235 million. Playing in the Pioneer League, the Ballers focus on fan engagement and innovation, including unique elements like home run derbies to break ties with a mission-driven, community-centric approach. What do you guys think?
First off, step one, name whatever you're saying the Ballers. You instantly win at life. Like, come on. Even if the team didn't actually exist, I think they could sell like 1 million jerseys, right? Like who wouldn't want that jersey? I want that jersey. Then I don't even care if the team exists. I just thought the branding was genius. The other cool thing about it is with the A's moving, right? The idea that they're like also known as the Oakland Bees, which I thought was also very clever. But with the A's moving, right? Normally a fan base would just take it, right? It's just, oh, yeah, I guess we lost our team. The cool thing about a founder is like, no,
yeah,
we're going to go build our own, right?
Yeah.
And I almost don't even care if it's successful. I care that he did it. As a founder, I just had mad respect for that move.
I was looking at some of the trends or some of the things that made this story possible. And first, they used technology. So they partnered with an app, I believe, fan-controlled sports, which is great. And it's like the new thing. I'm a huge NFL fan, and I cheer for the Minnesota Vikings, okay? I'm one of the most tortured sports team fan bases ever. And our arch nemesis is the Green Bay Packers. Now, for those of you who don't know, I'm going to just give you a little history. Green Bay Packers have a history, like 30 some odd years of franchise quarterbacks. They had Brett Favre, you know, and they just kept going. Aaron Rodgers, like winning and winning and winning. I remember one time going, how did they do this? And I found out the team is like a public company. It's controlled, It's owned by people, by the fans. And I thought to myself, and now we've got technology to make that easier. And so we're looking at new business models where even a sports team can go and pretty much like fractionalize their ownership and create engagement, create community. The power of community is amazing. I think it's a fantastic story.
Well, I think part of what you're talking about too is a community, but a sense of ownership. And I don't just mean like a dollar ownership. We create ownership in the music we listen to. We create ownership in the clothes that we wear. Like we create a sense of identity from the things that we quote own. Okay. And so at which point he said, hey, we got our team taken away from us. Now we collectively, community, we own this team, right? Again, not the dollar figure. The dollar figure is incidental. I'll give you a similar story. Since I'm from Columbus, Ohio, the only thing happening here is college football. And so the Ohio State Buckeyes play the Michigan Wolverines every year. It's a massive rivalry. It's the biggest rivalry in college football, right? And I think to myself, like, these two fan bases hate each other. And I'm thinking to myself, like, you've never played a day of football in your life, right? Like, you haven't played on this team, right? How did you get so, like, where did this ownership come from, right? I'm not even from Ohio. I'm from Connecticut, right? Like, I have no like connectivity to like having like made this team. And yet somehow I feel very passionate about their outcomes. I have a sense of ownership that I have built up for myself. It's totally mental, right? But I feel it. And what these guys did is they resurrected that ownership, that feeling that everybody had just lost with the A's. And they said, no, this is your team now, right? Now, let's overlook the fact that they're playing in a little league field, right? Let's overlook the fact that they're not even really in a league, right? Or you have no idea who the players are, right? What they're saying is you wanted to own something. You wanted to be a part of something. And this is the conduit to do it. Channeling that energy was genius. It was genius. Again, the name was even better, but it was awesome.
And the technology allows us to do this. Q, what's the general chatter? You usually find the responses. What are the opinions on this out there?
So the majority of opinions on this, Ed, are very positive. I think fans appreciate that the Oakland Ballers are keeping baseball alive in Oakland after the departure of the A's. Many of them see it as a community-driven alternative, especially as they engage with fans through ownership and innovative game formats like the home run derby to break ties. And as of July 11th, they allow fans to purchase ownership shares in the team. And that's inspired by the Oakland Roots Soccer Club crowdfunding efforts. So their focus on community engagement, such as open tryouts, it seems to really resonate with local fans who want to support a homegrown team. And the only real criticism, kind of the question that fans are having, is whether they can truly fill the void left by their beloved A's, especially given the lower quality of play compared to the MLB, for example. And there's also been allegations of player mistreatment, which could affect the team's reputation.
Yeah. Player mistreatment, I think would rank up there with like every team that's ever existed. Every player feels mistreated. I know I did. But that said, I think what's interesting about that is part of it is the ownership, just like, hey, we're all in this together. But a lot of that ownership has some pixie dust to it that wears off as people kind of forget that the A's aren't there anymore and et cetera. So they've got to be able to turn that momentum around. So there has to be something really unique about the product that keeps people coming back. That isn't just, oh, screw it, the A's aren't around anymore. Okay. So the first thing you mentioned, Q, you mentioned tryouts, right? That is awesome. That is awesome, right? We have a different version of that here in Columbus. There's a professional hockey team called the Blue Jackets, and they have this huge outreach program. It's massive, where all the people that are connected to the Blue Jackets, et cetera, they actually allow kids to get an entire set of high-end hockey gear and lessons for $200, which is like next to nothing. Like hockey gear is wildly expensive, and it's like good gear. My son's in the program, right? And I got there, and I grew up playing hockey, so I was familiar. I got there, and I was like, this is really well done, and it's branding the team. It's building affinity. It makes me want to go to a game. It makes me want to take my kid to a game. I'm like, what a genius way to build your fans by not just signing autographs. Get them on the field. Get them on the ice. Like, get them playing, right? Have showcase games where the fans are the ones playing, right? Where they get to play on the field. I would do that in a heartbeat. I just think that's so smart.
And all those principles apply. Just to cap this off, the founders listening, these principles can be transferred to your startup. You could do this
Absolutely
all over the place. It's great. Will, it's been awesome. And you and I get to talk all the time, but I'm so glad we're putting you out there and getting more people to get to know you with these clips and these conversations. I give the last word to you. If you had to say to people out there, founders who are going to be watching this, what message would you have for them in terms of Startups.com and anything that's on your mind?
Yeah, I'd say do less. I know that's going to sound surprising. It's usually be the opposite. When I say do less, I'm saying you've all got ideas. Some of you guys are running your startups right now. Some of you guys are working a job and you're thinking about doing a startup. Instead of trying to like move the entire world and try to move that mountain, move a pebble every day. Like that's how I did what I did. In starting 9 companies with 5 exits. I didn't have big ideas. I didn't make grand gestures. I did little tiny things, but I did them every single day. Find out the one customer you can pick up today. Find out the one feature, no matter how small, that you can ship today, and just get it done. Because that's all this business is about. It's not big moments. It's about a million tiny moments. So focus on the tiny moments.
You heard it straight from our CEO, founder of Startups.com. And guess what? If you want an advisor like Will will be your advisor. Help you with your pitch deck. Yeah, it'll be great. Okay, and you can sit around and hang out and talk with us. This is what we do, and I hope that we've demonstrated that. We're so approachable. You can ask us pretty much anything, and we're here to help. So check out Startups.com. Go to the website. There are so many free resources that you can check out even before you jump into the Accelerator program. But if you want to hang out with us and you just want to do this all day long or when you need it, especially on demand, online, that's at Startups.com. Will, it's been amazing. We're going to have you on as a regular.
Thanks,
Q, thank you so much for your questions. Jen, I know it was a little quiet. We didn't put you to work today, but that's okay.
Out of you, Jen.
Everyone, this has been Startups.com. We are here live Tuesdays, Wednesdays, and Thursdays. Check us out. Appreciate it. If you're watching this on YouTube or any of the socials, we appreciate a like, comment, subscribe. Spread the word. Let everybody know you're here, and we'll see you in the next show.